Madeline asks, why are DM25 and Aufstehen not joining forces? You know, what did you...
Do you want a quick answer? Because Aufstehen is playing very dangerous games around the edges of xenophobia. Aufstehen is not clear on the question of refugees and migrants and borders. As a left-winger, as an internationalist, as a progressive, as a liberal, I look at borders and the idea of keeping people out simply because they're foreign as an abomination.
All right, Jung Naiv, we're in Berlin, and I know you. Who are you again?
I'm Yannis Varoufakis. Ich bin ein Berliner, especially in this weather. It's good to say that.
What brings you here? Again?
Politics. Europe is in trouble, and we are going up and down, from north to south, east, west, center, and we're campaigning, and we're trying to create a different narrative that hopefully will give us all some hope that Europe can be saved from itself.
What kind of narrative do you want to establish?
Well, how about a humanist one, a rationalist humanist one? Because, you know, we are suffering the ill effects of an incredible amount of stupidity, of orchestrated stupidity. If you think about what the banks have been doing for the last 20 years, the way that they've created a crisis out of nothing, that has made good people suffer across Europe in different ways. So the Germans, the German savers, the people who find it very difficult to make ends meet, young people who don't have a job, or they are doing a degree in university and they have no idea of what they will do tomorrow because of the precarity of the labor market. Greeks that are condemned to permanent devastation and unemployment. People in all sorts of different kinds of countries that share one thing. They are at the receiving end of an unnecessary crisis, which has been reinforcing the worst instincts of nationalism, of racism, of xenophobia. This is where we are now. I know that here in Berlin, the weather is nice. Everybody thinks that, oh well, Europe can be taken for granted. It cannot be taken for granted. It's a battleground now, and we better win this war in favor of civilization.
But who's fighting who?
Well, just look around Europe. Everywhere you look, you see the rise of a kind of creeping neo-fascism. We have a neo-fascist strongman in Italy behind the government. We have the worst forces coming up here in Germany with the AfD, with this creeping xenophobia. Even amongst the left, you have a degree of xenophobia, very much fair. We have Nazis in Greece, being the third largest party in parliament. This is unheard of, unbelievable. And we have apathy. People have lost trust in the political system. And there's no worse threat for democracy than people who don't believe that democracy can change anything. We need to defend it. And to defend it, we need to convince ourselves first that we can reclaim control of our lives. And to reclaim control of our cities or our neighborhoods, we need to reclaim control of Europe, because we can't do it separately, in a fragmented way.
So I collected some questions from our audience, since last time I couldn't ask any of them. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Maybe let's keep it short so we can go through all of them.
Brevity is virtue.
Isabel asks, can you please explain your concept of a universal basic dividend and how it relates to the concept of a universal basic income? Do you have an estimate as to what the dividend could amount to for every single EU citizen?
The answer to the last question is no. I don't. I can tell you what I would like it to be, but let's be realistic. Okay, so the difference. Let's begin with what they have in common. It's universal and it's basic. So it's a basic payment to everyone, independently of who they are, what they do, whether they're rich, unemployed, migrant, whatever. Right. Yeah. The difference is where does the funding come from? So universal basic income comes from taxation, whereas universal basic dividend is a very different concept. And here's the description of it. Take, for instance, the big tech companies, Google, Facebook, and so on. They make huge quantities of money from, effectively, your work. every time you search something on the Google engine, every time you post something on Twitter or on Facebook, you're contributing to the capital stock of that company. This is unique in the history of capitalism. Consumers are creating the capital stock, not only buying services. Actually, we don't buy services, they're free services. But we help build up the capital stock. Now, why shouldn't a percentage of the shares of that capital belong to the public? So the idea is to say to them, you want to operate in Europe? 10% of your shares will have to go into a trust fund. So every child has a trust fund, not only the rich kids. And effectively, this is not taxation. You have a certain amount of capital, a certain amount of shares, not you and me personally, but as a society. The dividends, the profits, flow into that fund, and then they are distributed to every person, because we all use those services. We are all subject to the internet and so on and so forth. So that's a fundamental difference. I think this is the way of the future.
How did you come up with it?
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? That if we do not want to replace our welfare state with the basic income, it's very difficult to go to somebody who works really very hard and can't really make ends meet and say to them, look, we're going to tax you so that somebody can sit in their house, do nothing, and receive a basic income. This is very divisive. But you can say to them that, look, Google is making money out of everybody's searches. So part of Google's capital belongs to all of us. And let's share part of that profit, because it is our capital.
Right. All right, Marvin and Luca ask, what are the biggest mistakes leftists usually do or make, and what can they learn from the right?
Well, the greatest mistake we make is to think of ourselves as the guardians of goodness, whereas we have a lot of sins in our closet. We are authoritarian, we are boring, we have too long meetings, and we have a tendency, don't we? If you look at the last 100 years of the left, we have a tendency to create gulags for each other. So let's be very self-critical, let's be liberal, in small L terms, freedom-loving, right. Because we lost touch with the fact that the left in the 19th century was created as an emancipatory movement, a movement of liberation. And we started talking too much about justice and equality and not enough about liberty. The left should go back to its roots as an emancipatory movement, and justice will be a nice natural byproduct. And the fight of inequality will be a natural byproduct of freeing people from fear when they work, from alienation, from doing repetitive jobs, this is what the left has erred upon, and that is where we need to improve.
And what can be learned from the right?
Well, especially from the extreme right. Look at the way in which the fascists are binding together and bonding together. They're internationalists. Look at Donald Trump, Steve Bannon. They're here in Europe now. Steve Bannon is going up and down our continent, uniting the worst political forces in the world. They bind together. Look at us of the left. We are supposedly internationalist and humanitarian. We are so divided. Each one of us wants their little fiefdom. So we have to learn from the right and from the bankers. The fascists and the bankers are very strong internationalists. They're very good at being solidaristic with one another. That's something we need to do.
ANKAJU asks, how can burned out people, single mothers with 2 jobs and stressed out students that have to work 24/7 on their CV for life actually change the world, especially when it feels they do not have control even over their own life, especially like when it comes to gig economy, contract jobs only, working poor, paying rise rents, etc.
That's the most important question, isn't it? I have no answer to that. Nobody does. Because let's face it, those who are struggling to survive are the ones that have least amount of time to devote to political change. And that is what perpetuates their condition. This is what perpetuates a terrible set of social arrangements. What we need to do, especially those of us who have a little bit of time, is to create conditions for them, for those who are stressed, the single mother who has to have 2 jobs and then work all night looking after a child, to create circumstances for them to breathe more easily, even if it comes at the level of solidarity in neighborhoods, of creating volunteer groups for child minding, and for giving them opportunities to become engaged in the politics, which is necessary for their own emancipation.
Gar kein Ding asked, what should German social policies look like to maintain Germany's social security system in Europe? Should the EU change to a more German social market economy approach?
Well, the problem with the social market approach in Germany, or model, is that it has been on the decline in the last 20 years. It's not what it used to be. You are constantly losing rights. People have less and less access to good quality services, and more reliance on mini jobs and precarious jobs. So the social market model in Germany is crumbling. I remember when I was talking to Wolfgang Schäuble, it became abundantly clear to me, and people like that Schäuble, the Christian Democrats, they looked at the European crisis, what happened in Greece and other places, as a fantastic opportunity to attack the German social model. To say that, look, it's too expensive. We cannot afford. We can't compete with the Chinese and with the Vietnamese if we have such a generous welfare state in Germany. So they treated countries like Greece as a laboratory for doing away with their welfare state, for reducing workers' rights, for reducing the services provided to the poor, effectively. And that was a laboratory, a dystopic laboratory, where policies were tried with the intention of bringing them to Germany. So my message is very simple. We are in it together. The idea that it's the Germans versus the Greeks and so on is a great falsity that threatens German society.
NHS, when is the next financial and or economic crisis coming?
Wrong question.
Wrong question.
Wrong question. Let me say why it's the wrong question. You can ask that question if the previous crisis has gone away and we're worried about the next crisis. The previous crisis is still with us. We have not overcome the previous crisis. Absolutely. Absolutely. The political... why is Angela Merkel such a defeated political figure in Germany today? That's a rhetorical question. Let me answer it. It's because the economic model of the Eurozone and the way in which the German political economy has been embedded in the European economy is no longer sustainable. And the political center is no longer holding, whether it is in France, where both major political parties have disappeared. Here, the SPD is gone, it's finished. It's committed suicide and doesn't know how to revive itself. The Merkel aura has gone. Now we're just waiting for her to be thrown out. And that is simply a reflection of the fact that we have an economy, and social economy, which is no longer sustainable the way it was designed. So this crisis of 2008 is ongoing. It is undoing the foundations of the post-war model, and we need to shore it up. We need to replace it. We need to find a way of ending this crisis. To talk about the next crisis is a luxury we do not have.
So how can the current crisis that's still ongoing be ended?
Well, we must address its 4 different dimensions. One dimension is very low investment in the green technologies that are necessary for the planet, for Europe, and for the creation of good quality jobs. You should be very angry here in this country as Germans, because you are living in a moment when Germany has gigantic surpluses. There's lots of money in this country. Okay, so big companies are saving money. They have a pile of savings. The state, the federal government, has a surplus, has savings. Households have savings. And yet you've got the lowest level of investment in the history of the Federal Republic, which means low quality jobs, which means the environment is not taken care of. Yeah? So we need to look after that. And this is a pan-European thing. So low quality investment and low quantity of investment, that's number one. Too much private debt. Public debt, which is not within Germany so much, but if you look at it, if you add Germany, Italy, France together, because we need to, we have one currency union, so we should look at the problem as in its totality, it's out of control. And we have creeping poverty, we have precarity, we have the fate of young people who are indebted and who can't see how they will make ends meet in the future. These are the 4 crises we need to address. If we do not address them, and the address must take place at the pan-European level. You can't fix this problem in Germany without fixing it in France, without fixing it in Italy.
How long can we afford to not address them?
I think that we may have even run out of time. If you look at the political developments, the way in which this is a European crisis and nobody talks about Europe. We are facing a European election in May, and you will see that in this country, none of the major political parties are going to be discussing what needs to be done at the European level. And that is, if there is a fire destroying our house and we're not talking about the fire, let alone extinguishing it, we are running out of time.
G. Weber asks, if everything goes on as usual, what will Europe look like in 2025?
There will be no European Union. It will have collapsed. Already you can see it. It's disintegrating. Schengen, which I think is one of the great inventions and achievements of Europeans, the fact that we can travel around as if it's one country, this is crumbling. You now have a border between Austria and Italy. The other day I traveled from Athens to Paris, and I had to go through passport control. So the things that we were taking for granted up until a moment ago are can no longer taken for granted. Look, Italy, it's a large economy, it's an important economy, it's not Greece, it's far more important than that. It's a successful economy. They are like Germany, they're a net exporter. They have a surplus in the budget of the government, and yet it's a basket case. It is collapsing. We have a fascist Salvini in control that uses xenophobia in order to create hatred, to control the government even more powerfully. Europe is collapsing from under our feet, and we're not even thinking about it. We're a bit like the Weimar Republic in 1929.
Diet asks, why is German left so weak, and how can we change that?
Not just the German left, every left. Because we're just remarkably inept, we leftists. The first thing the leftists must do is we must look at ourselves in the mirror and say to ourselves, you're a stupid person. Now, let's begin with this. Because this is the time, after 2008 was a crisis that left-wing thinking always predicted. So we were the ones who predicted 2008, who explained why it would happen, who saw it happen, and yet we are the ones that who are failing so miserably in achieving political traction and going out there and saying to the people, look, we told you so, and here are the solutions. Instead, what we're doing is we're fighting amongst each other. We have, take Die Linke, take any left-wing political party here, split between Europeanists and non-Europeanists or more nationalists. We have not managed to sit around the table and ask ourselves the pertinent question. What should we do about a common crisis that is systemic in Europe and needs to be dealt with systematically? As DiEM25, we're trying to do that. We've been trying to do it since we inaugurated our movement here in Berlin at the Volksbühne in February 2016. But we find a lot of resistance amongst the left, who tend to be a bit feudal, each fiefdom defending its borders. And, life is not worth living like this.
Jenny asks, can I vote for DiEM25 at the European elections?
Yes, we're going to be running in May 2019 under Δημοκρατία Europa and European Spring, which will be the pan-European umbrella. We're going to have a very interesting group of candidates. We can't announce it now because we're going through the primaries. Everything is going to be decided completely democratically. So the answer is yes.
And Daphne asks, will you be the front runner?
Well, as I said, we have a democratic process and we have primaries.
You want to be the front runner?
Oh, look, I have made this statement once many years ago, and I'm going to stick to it. Anybody who wants to be a member of parliament should be banned from being a member of parliament, because it means there's something wrong with them. We should look at so when I became minister in the Greek government, I didn't want to, but I did it in the same way that you take rubbish out at night. It's a dirty job, somebody has to do it, And for the purpose of public service, there are times when you do it. But persons are not the issue. What is at issue is a program, an agenda that gives hope to people that you can have a rational way out of the impasse that we're facing.
Madeline asks, why are DiEM25 and Aufstehen not joining forces? You know, what did you...
Do you want a quick answer? Because Aufstehen is playing very dangerous games around the edges of xenophobia. Aufstehen is not clear on the question of refugees and migrants and borders. As a left-winger, as an internationalist, as a progressive, as a liberal, I look at borders and the idea of keeping people out simply because they are foreign as an abomination.
What's the long answer?
Well, the long answer is that we have to make a very important decision as progressives. This European Union is failing. There's no doubt about that. It's authoritarian, it's idiotic, it is pushing for policies that cannot work, have already failed. But the big decision that we must make, you must make, I must make, our viewers must make individually is, okay, what is the solution? Is it to break it down, to disintegrate the European Union and go back into the bosom of the nation state, which is what many people of the Aufstehen movement are thinking? Or is it to fix the European Union and to make it work for people across Europe? DiEM25 is absolutely determined and committed to helping the European Union survive and to transform it from within. If our friends and colleagues in Aufstehen adopt that view, we will be together. But they are not adopting that view. They are adopting the disintegrationist view, which is the greatest gift to the right-wing nationalists who are actually disintegrating the EU.
Kurt wonders, how can the SPD save or redeem itself?
The SPD is finished. Social democracy in Europe is finished. And they were finished some time ago. They didn't know it. It's a bit like the cartoon, you know, that runs and it's beyond the cliff and then suddenly looks down and says, oops, and falls.
It's irredeemable.
I think so. I think so. And for a very simple reason. You remember Schroeder here in Germany, you'll remember Tony Blair in Britain, the third wave social democrats who were completely co-opted by the financial sector, by the banking sector. Under Willy Brandt and Bruno Kreisky, the original generation of great social democrats, so the SPD, the social democratic parties, saw themselves as the referee, the go-between workers and capital. And they sat them around the table and achieved better deals for workers, and a chunk of profits of the capitalists went into the welfare state. But by the 1980s, late 1980s, this was too hard for them. It was much easier to fund hospitals, schools, and so on by cutting deals with bankers. So the deal, it was a Faust-like bargain. The Social Democrats turned a blind eye to what Deutsche Bank did, and in return they got some money, a small percentage, taxes and so on, from the huge profits of the banking sector. Very soon after that, they became completely sold to the financial sector. They actually believed the narrative of the financial sector, the idea of riskless risk, of derivatives, of financialization and so on, and they got financed by them as well. So the point I'm making is that in 2008, when this financial bubble that they had helped create, the Social Democrats had helped create, collapsed, and the banks went bust, they did not have, the Social Democrats in government, did not have either the analytical capacity or the moral authority to pick up the phone and say to the bankers, you're done. We're going to save the banks, but you're out. And instead, they pushed austerity onto the masses, and they transferred all of the losses of the banking sector onto the masses, whether they were Germans, Slovenians, Greeks, and it doesn't matter. From that moment onwards, they were finished.
Timber asks, how can you make sure that every state in the European Union plays by the rules?
Well, the question is which rules? When I was in the ministry, I could see the rules changing every day, and the question was who was writing them. And I can tell you who was writing them. The rich and powerful, against the interests of the many in every country. So The rules are absolutely essential for a well-functioning society and economy. But when we have rules that cannot be respected, it's like, imagine a rule which says that you will have by next June to break the world record at 100-meter sprint. You can have that rule, but you will break it because you can't do it. I hope you do make this record, but you can't, right? So if you look at the fiscal rules, the fiscal compact rules and so on, they're impossible to maintain. You have to violate them, otherwise Europe collapses. The European Central Bank has been operating under a rule book, which if they stuck to, there would be no European Union today. So we need to have a democratic process and a rational process of reassessing and reappraising the rules, otherwise the rules will simply be something that the powerful invoke in order to get their way against the majority.
Vasim asked, should the left push for abolishing the nation state as a response to globalization?
You cannot abolish the nation state, and you shouldn't try to abolish the nation state, because our nations, our states play a very important role, in the same way that our municipality plays a very important role. Globalization is a process that is ruthless, and it has to be distinguished from internationalization. It's not the same thing. Globalization is freedom of capital to move around, of trade to happen, and of capitalists and those who trade not to have to answer to any democratic polity, and for people not to be able to travel freely. And that's not internationalism. Yeah? So we need to fight that. And we need to fight this at every level, at the level of our neighborhood, of our municipality, and our state. But in order to be empowered to do this, you see, there is a major contradiction, a major fallacy here. People think that, it's either we have a strong nation state, a strong parliament in Berlin, democratic sovereignty in Berlin, or a strong Europe, or a sovereign European Parliament. Right. It's wrong. The fact that we don't have a federal parliament in Europe that is sovereign means that our individual parliaments, the parliament in Berlin, the parliament in Athens, the parliament in Paris, are weaker. So there is no zero-sum game. It's not that to strengthen your nation state you need to weaken the European Union, and vice versa. No, we need to strengthen both against the authoritarian power of those who really have the power.
Steve, who's Labour member and also joined Aufstehen, asked, why have you not learned, you personally, not learned that being right is not enough? You need to be empowered to change things.
I always knew that. I don't need to learn it. And I never unlearned it. And this is why I ran in elections and I won and I became a minister. So the question is not whether you know it. The question is, what do you do when you're in power? And of course, the number one lesson that one learns, and I learned, being not in power, never in power. I had an office. Let's not confuse the office with power, right? I was completely powerless. If you are the finance minister of a bankrupt state, you don't have that much power, you know. You have an office. You can actually sign. You have the power of not signing new loans.
Right.
Yeah, that was my power. But the main lesson is that we need unity. And we cannot do this either as Greeks or as Germans or as the French. We need to have a pan-European popular movement that empowers all of us to work synergistically together in order to bring about a genuine change. And this is, I think, the lesson that comes out of 2015 for me personally.
Final questions, maybe a little shorter answer. F. Kessler asks, what's up with Greek reparation claims for German crimes during World War II?
Well, would it not be...
Are they to be taken seriously?
I think they should be taken very, very seriously. When the German government says we're not paying and we're not interested and we're not going to even talk about it, that is, actually, I don't think this is very good for Germany either. I think that when there is a historical debt and a historical responsibility, it needs to be taken very, very seriously. I don't care about the money, per se. But, for instance, if you look at the enforced loan upon the Greek state There's actually a contract that the Wehrmacht had signed, and it exists in the Central Bank of Greece. You know, when people like Wolfgang Schäuble says to me, a debt is a debt, it's a debt. I say, yeah, well, whose debt? If a debt is, I don't believe in debts. I believe that debts can be written off. And I believe it's important to write debts off, like, you know, forgive and forget. We should always have this attitude. But if we, in order to turn a page and have closure, for instance, you know, what I said, I remember to Schäuble once was, I wish that Angela Merkel came to Athens and paid her respects to the victims of that period and said, yes, we have a debt, and deposited €1, one symbolic euro. This is from the German people. Even that would have been an important symbolic gesture to have closure, to say there is no debt, don't talk to us about it. I don't think this is very good for the German soul.
Kariana wonders, do you consider yourself a socialist or a Marxist?
Okay, labels are labels, okay? I do declare myself to be a Marxist because I've learned so much from Marx, but I'm not just from Marx. I'm a very erratic Marxist. I'm very inconsistent Marxist. And I'm a very eclectic Marxist. So I try to learn from everyone, especially from my enemy. So people like von Hayek, von Mises, extremely right-wing, pro-market people have been a great source of inspiration for me. But I'm Marxist to all intents and purposes.
Benny asks, in capitalism, is it possible that economical interests of the companies can be aligned with the overall interests of the whole society?
No. You want a brief answer? No.
Raushi asks, is the Greek crisis over as the news told me? Will Wolfgang Schäuble get a statue in Athens?
Unlikely. Highly unlikely. The crisis is not over. It's actually getting deeper. The English have an expression which I think is very apt in this occasion. What is happening to the Greek people is that insult is being added to injury. The conversion of the crisis into a permanent crisis is being described as the overcoming of the crisis. It's a bit like having a patient who goes into a coma as a result of medical malpractice and having the doctor celebrating that now we have stability because he's stable. You know, in financial circles, there is this very cruel expression, but actually quite apt. It's called the dead cat bounce. If you throw a dead cat from a height, it will bounce a little bit. That's Greek recovery. You know, it is so tiny and so minuscule and so pathetic that to celebrate that is to add insult to the Greeks' injury.
Do there need to be, Raskas wonders, does there need to be like European versions of Google, Amazon, Facebook,
yes,
Apple?
Absolutely. The only people who do that is the Chinese. The only economic bloc that has created competitors to big tech, to Silicon Valley, is China. This is why Donald Trump is up in arms against them. In Europe, we are really falling behind. We have no technological sovereignty in Europe. We are producing diesel engines, and we are, falling about 100 years behind the technological cycle of innovation and production.
Are you afraid of the Brexit, of a no-deal Brexit?
I'm afraid that Brexit unleashed xenophobic forces across Europe, especially in Britain, that it is going to be detrimental to the interests of the people of Britain and to the people of Europe, and that it's what I call a dog's Brexit. It's a ridiculous process, because in a sense, think about it, you have two teams negotiating, the European team and the London team. The London team doesn't give a damn about the interests of the British people, because they are too caught up in preserving their own power and preserving their government. Yeah? And they will do anything to do it, independently of whether that is good for the people of Britain or not. And it's not good what they're doing for Britain. And you have the team in Brussels who are exactly the same. They don't give a damn about the impact of Brexit on the Europeans. They care about signaling to the Spaniards, to the Hungarians, to the Greeks and so on, that if you dare vote against us, you're going to be crushed. So in the end, everyone's going to lose, so that the two power structures in London and in Brussels don't feel weakened. This is a complete political failure.
And final two question, Ricardo asks, summing it up, you are trying to give the capitalism a human face. Does that mean that you don't see any alternative to capitalism?
This is precisely what I'm not doing. As I said before, not without cost to my image, I'm a Marxist. So, and I remember the answer to the question about, is it possible to bring an alignment between corporate interests and the interests of society? Yes, it is no. Capitalism cannot be civilized, but it can be stabilized. That is a fundamental difference. You see, this is a problem I have with many left-wingers. They think that collapse is fantastic because after that something great. No. Remember the 1930s? Capitalism collapsed. And what came out? Nazism. Right? And the Second World War. So we need to stabilize capitalism, not because it will humanize it, but because it's the only way of creating some peace and tranquility so that we can have discussion amongst ourselves on how to move beyond capitalism.
And final question, Len asks, what are your 3 favorite movies?
Oh my God, this is a very unfair question. I can give you 300, but I can't give you 3.
What is your favorite?
I'll just, if you ask me 5 minutes later, I'll give you 3 different ones. So let me give you 3 very quick ones. Battleship Potemkin by Eisenstein. Mephisto by Szabo. I don't know whether you know that, with Klaus Maria Brandauer. And let's throw in The Matrix.
Oh, The Matrix?
Yes, of course.
Yanis, thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.